You didn't find this by accident. Something in you brought you here. Right now, before you even understand why, something has already shifted. Not in your thoughts, in your frequency. And once that shift happens, there's no going back. There is something operating beneath everything you see, something so constant and so fundamental that most people never question it. You've been taught to trust what's visible, what's solid, what can be measured and touched. But beneath all of that, beneath every object, every thought, every moment of your life, there is a field, not a metaphor, not an idea, but a real, measurable layer of reality that exists beyond the limits of your senses. This field is not passive. It is not empty space. It is alive with potential, constantly shifting, constantly responding. And here is the part that changes everything. It is responding to you, not to your words, not to what you say you want, but to something deeper, to your internal state, to your frequency. Every moment of your life, you are broadcasting a signal into this field, not consciously most of the time, but continuously. Your emotions, your beliefs, your patterns of thought, they all combine into a vibrational output. And that output is not ignored. The field receives it, processes it, and reflects it back to you as your reality. This means your life is not random. It's not a series of coincidences happening without reason. It is a reflection, a feedback loop, a mirror that is constantly showing you what you are emitting at the deepest level. You are not separate from reality. You are participating in it. You are influencing it, shaping it, interacting with it in ways you may not have been aware of until now. And once you begin to see this, once you truly understand that there is an invisible system responding to your internal state, you can never go back to believing you are just a passive observer in your own life. Everything you've been taught to believe about yourself is based on the idea that you are solid, fixed, and defined. A body, a personality, a history, but at the deepest level, that is not what you are. Science itself has shown that when we look closely enough, beyond cells, beyond atoms, what we find is not solidity, but movement, not structure, but energy. You are not a static object. You are a dynamic process, a constantly shifting pattern of energy and information that exists in multiple possibilities at once. This is not abstract philosophy. This is the foundation of quantum understanding. That reality, at its core, is made of probabilities, not certainties. That means you are not limited to a single version of yourself. The person you think you are is only one expression, one outcome that has been repeated enough times to feel permanent. But beneath that, there are countless other versions of you, versions that think differently, act differently, live differently. And here is the key. Those versions are not imaginary. They are potential states waiting to be selected. What determines which version becomes real is not luck or fate. It is observation. It is attention. It is the frequency from which you perceive and engage with your life. When you constantly identify with your past, you reinforce the same version of yourself. But when you begin to shift your internal state, your beliefs, your emotional patterns, your sense of identity, you begin to access different possibilities. You are not locked into who you have been. You are a field of potential that can reorganize itself at any moment. And the moment you truly understand that, the idea of limitation starts to dissolve. Around your body, there is a field of energy. This is not something mystical or imaginary. It is measurable, detectable, and constantly active. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field. Your brain produces electrical signals. Your entire system is radiating information outward at every moment. This field acts like both a transmitter and a receiver. It sends signals into the environment, and it also picks up signals from it. You can think of it as your personal interface with reality, a system that determines how you interact with the world and how the world responds to you. When this field is coherent, when your thoughts, emotions, and internal state are aligned, it becomes clear and powerful. Your signal is strong. It carries consistency, and because of that, the responses you receive from the environment become more organized, more supportive, more aligned with what you are projecting. But when your field is fragmented, when there is conflict within you, when fear and doubt dominate, when your thoughts and emotions are pulling in different directions, the signal becomes distorted. It loses clarity, and the responses you experience begin to reflect that distortion. This is why two people can exist in the same external conditions, but have completely different experiences of life. It is not just about what is happening around them. It is about the field they are generating within themselves. Your halo is not symbolic, it is functional. It is the mechanism through which you communicate with reality at the most fundamental level. And once you begin to understand that, you realize that changing your life is not only about changing circumstances. It is about refining the signal you are sending out. Because that signal is what reality is constantly responding to. One of the hardest things to understand, especially in the moment, is why things fall apart, why people leave, why plans collapse, why something you held on to tightly suddenly disappears. It feels personal. It feels like loss. It feels like something has gone wrong. But what if it hasn't? What if instead of something being taken from you, something is being made possible for you? Because here is a principle most people never fully see. You cannot receive what you have not made space for, not emotionally, not mentally, not energetically. If your life is already full of attachments, expectations, identities, and patterns, there is no room for anything new to enter. When something leaves, it creates a vacuum. And that space is not neutral. It is charged with potential. It is an opening. A gap in your current structure where something different can emerge. But the field does not fill that space randomly. It fills it based on the frequency you hold after the release. If you hold on to resentment, the space fills with more of the same. If you hold openness, clarity, and trust, something entirely different can take shape. This is why loss often feels like confusion. You are standing in between realities. The old one has ended, but the new one is not yet fully formed. And in that space, your frequency matters more than ever. Nothing left without creating an opening. Nothing ended without shifting your trajectory. The question is not why it happened. The question is, what are you now available for that you weren't before? There is a concept in physics that challenges everything we think we know about reality. It's called superposition. The idea that something can exist in multiple states at once until it is observed. At the smallest levels of reality, particles are not fixed. They do not have one position, one outcome, or one identity. They exist as possibilities, many at once, until something interacts with them and forces a single outcome to appear. Now consider what that means for your life. Right now, there is not just one version of your future. There are many. Versions where things work out, where they don't, where you grow, where you stay the same, where opportunities appear, where they pass you by. All of these possibilities exist simultaneously as potential states. And what determines which one becomes your reality is not random chance. It is the way you observe your life, the lens you look through, the internal state you bring to each moment. If you are constantly expecting limitation, you will notice and reinforce outcomes that match that expectation. If you shift into a state of openness, awareness, and possibility, you begin to notice different pathways. Ones that were always there but previously invisible to you. You are not choosing from nothing. You are selecting from a field of possibilities that already exist. And your attention, your focus is what brings one version into form. This is not about controlling every detail. It's about recognizing that your perception is not neutral. It is active. It is shaping what becomes real for you. Most people believe their life is defined by what has already happened, by their past experiences, their patterns, their history. And without realizing it, They use that past as the primary lens through which they see everything. They expect the same outcomes because they have seen them before. They anticipate the same challenges because they are familiar. And in doing so, they unknowingly recreate the same reality again and again. This is not because change is impossible. It's because their observation hasn't changed. When you look at your life through the lens of your past, you filter out anything that doesn't match it. Opportunities can appear, but they go unnoticed. New directions can open, but they feel unfamiliar and are dismissed. The mind is wired to recognize patterns, and it will always prioritize what it already knows. This creates a loop, a cycle where the past informs the present and the present reinforces the past. Over time, it starts to feel like life is fixed, like nothing truly changes. But what's actually happening is repetition at the level of perception. Breaking that cycle does not begin with external action. It begins with awareness. The moment you recognize that you are observing through a conditioned lens, you create a gap. And in that gap, something new becomes possible. You don't have to erase your past. You don't have to ignore it. But you do have to stop using it as the only reference point for what is possible. Because the moment you shift how you see, you begin to shift what you experience. Pause for a second. Take a breath. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat, not just as biology, but as a signal. Now say this, out loud if you can. My frequency is my protection. My energy is clear. I am ready to receive what is meant for me. That's not a wish. That's a broadcast, and the field is already responding. Here's the truth. Your life doesn't change from peak moments. It changes from your baseline frequency. Not when you feel inspired, but in ordinary moments. When you're stressed, when you're triggered, when old patterns return. Each time you choose to shift back, you strengthen your field. That's how a new reality becomes stable. When your frequency rises, low-energy situations stop sticking. Negative patterns lose grip. Certain people and problems simply disappear. Not by force, but because there's no longer a match. You don't fight chaos, you become unavailable to it. There comes a point where understanding is no longer enough, where concepts, ideas, and explanations stop being useful unless they are experienced directly. That point is where change actually begins. Right now, you're at that point. Because everything you've just moved through, the field, your nature, your signal, your patterns, leads to one thing: activation. Not something external happening to you, but something internal shifting within you. And this shift does not require perfection. It does not require you to suddenly become someone completely different. It requires something much simpler but far more powerful: awareness combined with intention. Pause for a moment. Notice your body. Notice your breath. Notice the space you are in. Without trying to change anything, just observe. Because the moment you observe, you interrupt the automatic patterns that usually run your experience. Now take a slow breath in. As you do, recognize that this moment is not tied to your past. It is not limited by what has already happened. It is open, unformed, full of possibility. And in that space, you have a choice. You can continue reacting from old patterns, or you can begin responding from a different state. Not by forcing anything, but by consciously selecting the way you show up in this moment. This is what activation really is. It is the decision to no longer operate unconsciously, to no longer let your default patterns define your experience without question. It is subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, but it changes everything. Because from that moment on, you are no longer just reacting to life. You are participating in shaping it. Most people think change happens in big moments, sudden breakthroughs, dramatic decisions, life-altering events. And while those moments can happen, they are not what actually creates lasting transformation. Real change happens in the ordinary moments. It happens in how you respond when something doesn't go your way. It happens in what you focus on when your mind drifts. It happens in the small, repeated choices you make throughout the day. Choices that seem insignificant on their own, but compound over time. Your state is not something you set once and keep forever. It fluctuates, it shifts. And that's normal. The goal is not to hold a perfect state at all times. The goal is to recognize when you've drifted and return. That return is where the real work is. Each time you notice yourself falling back into old patterns and choose to shift, even slightly, you are reinforcing a new way of operating. You are building a different baseline. At first, it takes effort. It requires awareness, but over time it becomes more natural. The new state becomes easier to access, easier to maintain. What once felt unfamiliar starts to feel normal. This is how your reality begins to change, not through one moment, but through consistency, through repetition, through the accumulation of small shifts that gradually reshape how you think, feel, and respond. You are not trying to create a peak experience. You are creating a new default, and once that default changes, everything that follows begins to align with it. There is a common belief that protection comes from controlling external circumstances, from avoiding problems, managing risks, or trying to predict and prevent what might go wrong before it even happens. Most people spend a large part of their lives trying to create this kind of safety, by controlling environments, controlling people, or controlling outcomes. But real protection doesn't work that way. Because no matter how much you plan, no matter how careful you are, you cannot control everything that happens around you. Life is too complex, too dynamic, too unpredictable. Situations will arise that you didn't expect. People will act in ways you didn't anticipate. Challenges will appear without warning. And this is where most people feel powerless, but the truth is, your power was never meant to come from controlling the outside. It comes from something far more stable, something that is always available to you. Your internal state, what you think, how you feel, how you interpret what is happening. This is the space where your real influence exists. This is the only place where you have consistent, direct control. And more importantly, this is the place that determines how everything else affects you. Your internal state decides what gets to reach you and what doesn't. When your state is reactive, unstable, or overwhelmed, everything feels amplified. Small problems feel bigger. Minor conflicts feel intense. External situations seem to have more power over you than they actually do. But when you are grounded, clear, and stable internally, something shifts. The same situations begin to feel different. Things that once triggered strong reactions start to lose their intensity. You notice more but react less. You respond instead of reacting automatically. You move through challenges with a sense of control. Not because the situation changed, but because you did. It's not that difficulties disappear. It's that your relationship to them changes completely. And as this shift stabilizes, something even more powerful begins to happen. You start to notice that not everything can reach you in the same way anymore. Certain people who once drained your energy no longer affect you as deeply. Certain patterns that used to repeat begin to fade. Situations that once pulled you in no longer have the same grip. It's not that the world changed overnight. It's that your frequency changed, and with it, your point of interaction with the world. This is not avoidance. You are not running away from challenges or pretending they don't exist. This is alignment. When your internal state shifts, what resonates with you shifts as well. And because of that, your experience begins to reorganize itself. What no longer matches your state starts to fall away naturally. What aligns with your new state begins to appear more often. Your reality starts filtering itself, not through force, but through resonance. This is what real protection looks like. Not a wall, not a shield, not something that blocks everything out, but a shift in your internal frequency that changes what you engage with and what is able to engage with you. And once you experience this, even briefly, something becomes very clear. The most powerful form of control is not controlling the outside world, it's mastering what happens within you. Now that you understand this, something important changes. Because this isn't just an idea to think about, it's something to live. Everything you've moved through up to this point leads here, not to a conclusion but to a beginning. A shift in how you approach each moment of your life from now on. Because the truth is, nothing changes unless it becomes part of how you live daily. Not just when you feel motivated, not just when things are going well, but especially in the ordinary moments. In the quiet moments. In the moments where your old patterns try to return. That's where this becomes real. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to hold a high state all the time. That's not realistic, and it's not the goal. The goal is awareness. To notice when you've drifted, to recognize when you've fallen back into old reactions, and to choose again to return to a better state. That return is everything. Every time you return, you strengthen something within you. You build a new baseline. You make it easier for your mind and body to operate from a more stable, more grounded, more intentional place. Over time, that state becomes more natural. What once required effort becomes automatic, and this is when your reality truly begins to change. Not because you forced it, but because you became different, because your responses changed, your focus changed, your energy changed, and as that happens, your life begins to reflect it. Opportunities feel easier to recognize, decisions become clearer, situations that once confused you start to make sense. You're not reacting blindly anymore, you're moving with awareness. And that changes everything. But here is the most important part. This is not something you do once. It's something you return to, again and again. Every day you have a window, a small moment, especially in the beginning of your day where your mind hasn't fully locked into its usual patterns yet. That moment matters more than you think. Because in that space, you can choose your state before the world influences it. You can decide how you show up, not what will happen, but how you will meet whatever happens. And that choice sets the tone for everything that follows. So instead of trying to control everything around you, focus on this. How do I want to respond today? What kind of state do I want to operate from? What version of myself do I choose to be in this moment? These are simple questions, but they lead to powerful changes because over time, those choices don't just affect your day. They shape your life, and eventually you begin to see something clearly. You were never powerless. You were just focused in the wrong direction. And now that your focus has shifted inward, everything else begins to follow. Nothing in your life has been random. Not the delays, not the endings, not even this moment. You weren't being ignored. You were being prepared, and now, you're no longer waiting for life to change. You are the one who changes the signal. And when the signal changes, reality follows.